Okay, here we are. I'm Brian. That's Harry. Hello.
Howdy. Good.
How are you this morning?
It is a morning. You give away our time of recording secret.
Well, I mean, I'm sure enough people will watch this and figure out where the sun is. You can kind of do it that way. I don't know where you are in the world. Don't tell anyone.
I have great unnatural light in my room to make it seem as if I'm perennially awake in the morning.
I mean, it's important to be awake in the morning, I guess, especially if you're on a podcast. Speaking of podcasts, do you maybe want to introduce yourself to people who are listening currently?
Where are we? What is this?
What is this thing?
Who am I? That existential dread creeps in again. The morning sunlight. My name is Harry Wolff. I have. Who am I? Yes, right. I am a director of engineering at MongoDB. I've been there for about I've been there for 5 years this month, longest job I've had, which is huzzah for me. I have been a manager now for around 5 years, in the industry for over 10 years. Historically a UI engineer, making pixels pushed around on the browser and then being told that they were pushed the wrong direction and pushing them back. So that was a lot of fun earlier in my career. I also have a YouTube channel that I post free content supported by ads supplied by YouTube about front end in general. And occasionally I get feisty and talk about Rust because I aspire toward more strange parts of coding. But that's a weekly YouTube channel about coding, JavaScript mostly, on Mondays. And that's the 411.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair introduction. Great work.
Yeah, thank you.
I want to. So I want to let's talk about YouTube, or at least your YouTube channel. But let's start with Rust. What?
Oh God.
What do you mean? What are you?
What am I doing? Yeah,
right.
I'm just trying to stay rusty. I do it all for the jokes. Is really what it is, because humor keeps me young and graying. I don't know. Rust is, I like to challenge myself. It was funny. I was talking to some friends yesterday about note-taking apps, and it reminded me that in 2013, I decided to make a native iOS note-taking app, which like the source code is on my GitHub page. It's all in Objective-C, so I don't know what I was doing with so it's a strange use of my spare time, but that's kind of where I am with Rust, is tickling my brain in ways that hasn't been tickled before. It's a weird metaphor. By learning things that I'm not familiar with. I still can't get over that's a really strange metaphor.
I'm not able to keep a straight face, but if you're listening, I'm like, don't say anything about that. Just let it ride. Just go. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've always been a front-end developer with JavaScript, which is a very high-level garbage-collected language that has a lot of the low-level concerns handled for me. And I've always been curious about how things work beneath the hood, right? It's always asking the question why, getting an answer, then asking why again, kind of digging deep. I draw the line at the circuitry. Like, I will not get into hardware because you make a mistake there and then you have to like pay to replace it, whereas software, you just reinstall it. So it's not too bad. But Rust is just, I mean, it's definitely in vogue. It doesn't hurt that it's a thing to talk about. And it's curious because of, I mean, the novel thing with Rust is how it handles memory management. And that's a thing that's new as far as modern programming languages go. So I have excitement about that. My biggest pain point in learning Rust has been, what do I use it for? Because I don't really have any immediate needs outside of just like arbitrary programs. But it's mostly a curiosity to scratch.
Yeah. The reason I ask is that I am familiar with your positions on JavaScript, which we'll get into in a minute. But also like for the Rust content that we put out, like I've said it before, and that the Rust community is passionate, and so that's both great. And when we screw up, I mean, it's great when we screw up because they let us know, but sometimes we don't screw up and they let us know that so it's kind of like, well, all right. I understand.
It's I think all communities are obviously passionate. I think where Rust gets more, honestly, I think it probably comes from a place of insecurity. If I'm uh, brave enough to say that because it's still so young that to make mistakes has a far deeper impact than were to say make a mistake in Java, where you have decades of legacy that you can't, like that cement's very deep in the ground. You're not moving that. Rust is still close to the surface.
Yeah. No, I do find well, I find that a lot of people say I would love or I want to learn Rust, but either I don't have time or I don't exactly know how. And
I mean, the way I learn anything, it's a two-step process for me. It's one, I read as much as I can about it. And the metaphor I always use is I like to get a layout of the house. Like, where's the bathroom? Where's the kitchen? Where's the bedroom? Like, understand where things are. But then when I actually get down to actually using and living in the house, you start understanding like all the weird idiosyncrasies. And that just is a result of throwing yourself at the problem. So I've read a lot about Rust now, but I've been trying to throw myself to solve a programming problem and just fail repeatedly. And that's the biggest part of it. Is just not making sure you get back up every time it hits you down. So it will just keep knocking you down.
Hmm. Is there anyone that's been really helpful for you for Rust that you kind of would stand out? Or
the Rust book, the free book that they have is fantastic. I read it on vacation once because that's my choice of free time usage.
I don't want to say it.
Yeah, no, I'm aware.
Okay.
I was at the poolside, like my wife's reading like a whatever, and then I'm just like, Rust, how to do memory management with a box vector ref. Okay, good. It's also a great sleeping aid too. So both for stimulation and restation. I don't know what it is. Yeah, the Rust book's great. I mean, honestly, I've just gone to all the official documentation. Is the Rust book? You get a overview. There's Rust by example on there as well to kind of show how things are done in Rust. There's koans that kind of have little small programming problems that you can approach and then solve for to kind of actually put finger to keyboard and actually apply yourself. What was the last one? Only recently have I started actually reading the like SDK docs, like actually like how things work, and that only started happening as I was trying to code a program myself, where I had to actually reference the docs, read the manual to understand what I was doing, but I wasn't even up to that stage until I actually had the background general knowledge.
Okay, that all checks out. Before I just wanted to pull on that thread as soon as we didn't plan any of this. I heard Russ and I was like, I want to hear what he has to say about Russ. I think probably now it makes sense to like take a step back, talk about YouTube, talk about why your YouTube channel exists. And then I'll ask you questions about like the things you say on YouTube, and maybe we can have a conversation about those things. So question number one is why do you have a YouTube channel? What is that?
Boredom. No.
Yeah.
So there's the lot. So I used to be the guy in the office that would come up to you and be like, "Hey, did you hear about this 0.1.1 release of this new software that you never heard about?" And people would be like, "No, Harry, I don't care, Harry. Go away, Harry." But my excitement was always around that, just like new, fun, exciting things. And I eventually channeled that into a podcast where I kind of model myself off of the Daily Show, but weekly, where I talk about all the newest front-end happenings. And I did that for around 2 years with a friend of mine, and it was fun. And then it kind of petered out, and I migrated it to YouTube, where I was then doing that on YouTube, and it was in video form. And then I kind of started morphing into just doing general YouTube content, just talking about code. And then I just started then I just didn't stop, which is how it goes. The line I always say to people is, if I stopped doing YouTube, I would just then probably watch more TV, which isn't the most like delightful replacement. So, that's an impetus, but definitely going through my own bout of like, trying to refine my joy of the channel, because I think I've been a bit in the weeds for a little bit the past year, like personally, frankly. And I'm trying to just refine what videos give me joy to like then share that on the channel as well.
Do you feel like are you in your own just kind of just the way that you pass the time? Like, are you looking at kind of what's trending in front end? Like, are you always keeping up with GitHub and like that sort of thing? Like, and then then the kind of the light bulb went off and you're like, I should have a platform for this?
Yeah, I mean, it was, even to this day, I still keep up to date with what's going on. I used to, read 60% of articles that I'd find, and I think I'm down to like 30% now, just due to other time commitments. But the impetus was the original drive was just, if occasionally, eventually I found people at my jobs that enjoyed my enthusiasm. So, it validated that there was something valuable there. And then I think one day, literally, the thought was like, well, if they find it valuable, then maybe the internet might as well. And it was really that thought that kind of opened that door to experiment.
Yeah. The reason I ask is Kalen, who's been on this podcast a few times, but he's our front-end developer at LogRocket, and he's exactly the same way. And we couldn't, we meaning the content team, like I couldn't do the job without him going, hey, is this all the time I will say to him, does anyone care about this? And he'll tell me straight up, like, no, it doesn't, like no one cares, or here's how it could matter. But it's that kind of, and I can't go out and find another Kalen, for example. So which is what I liked about, I've watched some of your videos, and I like that, you have opinions on things and you share those things, and he does the same thing, just not on YouTube. So that's why I was asking, is I'm interested in kind of like that, because it's really not, I don't want to say that people don't, at least in the web dev space, don't share their opinions, but I like hearing, I don't know if I want to.
Well, I try not to share my first impulse, because that's usually wrong. So I definitely have learned, especially as I've gotten older and slower, I've been better at just suppressing that first knee-jerk blah, and then kind of refining it into blur. And that's kind of what you see on YouTube.
That's a great way to say. Yeah, I like that.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's super accurate. I get it. Yeah. Okay. I almost kind of want to segue into all right, great. So you take your first impulse and then you go, and then it's like, well, also, the idea that front end is stable.
Well, that's my newest one, right? Which is actually funny. I recorded that video. So one of my recent videos was, front end is boring because it's stable. And it was funny because I was actually looking on Twitter that past week, and all of a sudden I saw all these tweets about how front end's never been more exciting and changing. And I was like, well, that's not what I said in it was before my video got released, and it was in that space of recording it and releasing it that Twitter was like, front ends are exciting. But the main point, I mean, in all honesty, I think most of my points and opinions are boring when you get down to it, because they usually distill down to it depends, and I try to keep as close to objective truth as possible, which is also subjective, what's objective, but that's a different podcast. But basically, the way in which front-end applications are written, at least like the UI approach, like how you actually code some button and that gets onto the screen, has largely remained unchanged since React did change everything. I started in professional development in 2010 when jQuery was still exciting and fairly new. 2012 Backbone was rising, and that was also very new. And then you have AngularJS, and those were kind of the three paradigms that at least I lived through. So that's where I think they matter, because that's my perspective. But they mostly took a fairly imperative way of, making UI on the screen where, this happens, so you do this, and then this happens, you do this. The React made the whole declarative model, which people have talked about ad nauseum, where you just say, this is what I want, and you handle the rest. And that's kind of been the MO of most modern frameworks. And that hasn't really changed. Like, there's been color and accents added around it. You have Svelte taking a compiler first approach as opposed to a runtime approach. I think Rich Harris on the podcast before talking about that as well. But the true excitement, in my opinion, of front end is outside the browser in many ways, where you have tooling looking towards Rust to provide features and functionalities that are not possible with just JavaScript.
So yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me, I've mentioned this a few times in the past that we on the LogRocket blog ran a survey and asking people what they didn't like about front end, and far and away the winner was complexity. There's like just way too much stuff. So when I see that, and maybe I'm not going to accuse you of clickbait, but the
Oh,
maybe
please. But so actually, that's a funny thing. I've actually been trying to veer towards clickbait more
for the views, yeah.
For the
Okay.
view, someone, a very smart gentleman, gave a good piece of advice to me. They know who they are. That clickbait in some ways says more about the viewer than it does about the author, because what is the honey attracting? Like you might be making the honey, but it doesn't exist without some bees flocking to it. Bears.
Yeah, no, so they're having been doing content for mostly web devs over the last few years. Clickbaity titles, I have the data. Like, it does work. The difference is you have to deliver. Like,
Yeah.
you can entice people to read, which is a charitable way of describing clickbait. But they're not going to come back if it's garbage.
Yeah.
So I mean, also I get accused fairly often of like blatant content marketing, and it's just like, yeah, like that's yes, that is of course that's what we do.
It's said as if it's a bad thing, but it's literally like it's important.
Like, I would love to give this stuff away for free, but like it is free. You just have to suffer a small ad at the bottom that says like, did you know that LogRocket existed? If you're interested, you could click this button. Anyway,
I mean, clickbait isn't a thing that's just from the internet. You talk about newspapers where they have leads that I'm sure people sweated over to make sure they could put in there. Like all you have is the title and the small lead of some newspaper clipping to entice people to read the content, and that's the original clickbait in some ways.
It's I try not to do we don't do big declarative statements on the blog, mostly because nobody wants that. But it is funny, like the clickbait argument, I guess. I don't know. I don't think we get accused of it all that much anymore.
You want to have one step foot in the provocative and one step foot in truth. And so long as you can bridge, and I think to your point, it's very true for web dev, especially where you want to make sure that you do have that bridge towards meat. Because if there's just cotton candy there, it's just going to give people a stomachache.
Yeah, I do. And I can't tell. This is something that I think about a lot, is there are, I don't know if they're necessarily tropes, but there are kind of like, we can call them frameworks. Like this is how you write a front end blog post. And it's kind of like this versus that, or like, this is how you do a thing, or like why you should care about, like, there's probably 10 or 15. And I don't know who decided on that, like where did this come from? And maybe just because like, and of course, we do it because that's what people identify in their Google search results and go like, okay, that's the thing I want to look at. But yeah, there are so many other options that we could go with. But whenever
it's evolution.
Yeah.
It's evolution because, someone started it and that's the one that won, and then it kind of grows and it went from, I have 10 things to tell you about this topic that you're going to enjoy. And then it got down through many generations of 10 things that are great. You're like, oh, well, there's that. The wolves used to eat us and now they're our dogs.
Well, it's funny, like when I ask some developers, like Kalen, for example, when I ask him like what he thinks we should do, as to evolve, and he just goes, just charts. Like, all I want is charts. Show me the things that he's like, I just want to see the things that do this. Like, you're not interested in the words. He's like, no, I'll figure it out myself. Okay, well, you might be different.
Yeah.
So one of the things that, talking about or thinking about the evolution of content, our content on being an engineering manager always does super poorly. Like, and I understand why, kind of, but I don't think it's the quality of the content. But anyways, I bring this up because you do talk about being an engineering manager a lot, and I think that it probably is perhaps more successful than what we put out. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on, like, how do you think about putting that stuff out? Is it just kind of like things that come to your head and you just want to rip out an episode on that, or?
I mean, the best thing about engineering content is that it doesn't require as much preparation
Yeah.
than technical content because it's mostly verbal and not as hard, which isn't to diminish the value of the content, in my opinion. Like, I still think it's valuable and like put effort into making sure it's good, but it's mostly coming from within than it is. I mean, most of the work is just organizing my thoughts that they're delivered in a way that there's a narrative that can be delivered. Even for my YouTube channel, though, those videos, I think I've managed to make them better performing videos, but historically they've also been pretty underwhelming performance for those. And I think, the obvious reasons that I would point to as well is it's a smaller audience that you're targeting. It's also the niche that I've initially carved for myself isn't there. If I was a management YouTube channel, then maybe I'd attract people there. But to have an only management YouTube channel sounds scary to me. To have content to power that weekly, that would definitely drop down the frequency there. I'm actually thinking up a video that I might record tonight to get the energy, another manager video. The impetus is this month is my 5th year anniversary at MongoDB, which is huge for me. This is the longest I've ever been at a company. Longest before that was 3 years. Typically at tech, it's like 2 years is the average that you hop, skip, and jump. So I want to like brag about that and like talk about it because I like myself. But just having a video that's like, hey, I'm 5 years at MongoDB, yay! Like that doesn't, people are selfish by default. So how is that going to, like, what is it for me? Like there's nothing valuable there. And I kind of was meditating on that. And there's another video that I've been wanting to do for a while about, why people leave jobs or why you should know to leave a job. And I have, thoughts around that, which I'll save for the video. But kind of the title that I'm kind of, distilling down to is 3 reasons you should leave your job. And then in there, I can talk about how I have not left my job because those reasons do not apply to me right now. So it's kind of like weaving in my personal, and actually is pretty woven, I guess. It's a nice wicker basket, not the wicker man. Sorry, I have like random tangents that are just.
I got your reference. Hopefully, I'm with you. Yeah.
I know that I'm old when no one gets my references anymore. That's how I know that it's time for me to clock out and skedaddle. It always hurts my soul when a reference is unmet, but yeah.
For me, I've realized that it's just stop making Simpsons references at work because nobody's just stare at you and go like,
That's a deep trove to pull from too.
Wow,
because you have like this. Well, there's like surface level Simpsons jokes that like are generally applicable. And you have like the niche ones because you have that. So I don't have the niche ones at all. Be like, yeah, I get that one. Like,
no, because that was in like 94 and it was not the focus of the episode. But anyways,
all I know is tappa. That's my gold standard.
Nice. You got me. Your audience of one thought that was funny. I mean, it's funny, like the thinking, like I've seen plenty of, how to prepare for an engineering interview, like those are very popular. And you're suggesting the opposite, how to create, like how to not interview, how to leave your job.
It's more like why? Like, why should you? Like, does your manager suck? You should leave, type of thing.
Yeah. Well, I've seen plenty of content out there that's if you are wondering whether your manager sucks, or even if you just like are thinking about, should I not be here? Then maybe you should go, which I don't think is true. Like now we are definitely wandering into the territory of the video you'd like to make, but.
I mean, I'm not too upset about that. Like, I've also learned in my old age that repetition eventually gets the point across, and there's no, if something's so fragile that you can't repeat it, then it's not worth saying. So, go for it.
Okay. So I don't think like it's okay to evaluate. Isn't that the whole point? Like you're evaluating what your future is like, and it is possible for new information to like, you should bring it up. Like that's really, I think, like if you think that you're not happy at a company or your role or whatever it is, like you should maybe go to your manager. I don't know how that conversation would go and be like, listen, I think that you're doing a bad job and I'm unhappy with you, but maybe like if it would work anywhere, I suppose it would work in engineering.
I mean, it's also, validating your perspective of reality is true, right? Like if you're unhappy and you're uncomfortable, can you turn to your manager to validate that's real? or do you have to turn to a friend to confirm that? Because that's where a lot of my insecurities come from. Is like I'll have some belief, but I want to make sure that it's one that is shared outside my own two eyes. Which ideally you can rely on your manager to say like, yes, like you're not growing, like you're not growing because I failed in some ways. Like is ideally the conversation that is there, right? Like I haven't been challenging you. You're not really getting new things to do. So like, yeah, let's either give you new challenges or there's no more room for you to grow here. Not for lack of you, but for lack of the company's needs type of thing. Which isn't even something I'm going to talk about in the video, but that's still an interesting point.
Mm. Yeah, I think that would be hard for some people to like go to a peer and be like, "Are you having a nice time?" And if they say yeah, and you're like, "Well, I'm not," and I guess it depends on what you're working on or just all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. It's also like the question of is it okay to leave a company because you're bored? And I wrestled with that for a long time. And I think that's related to what we were just talking about. Like if you're not being challenged, if you're not being stimulated, and you crave that, you need that, it kind of show itself as boredom. I think that is a very valid reason to look elsewhere.
For sure. I think that can be pushed, and I'm not being contrarian here. Like I think if you're bored in really any walk of life, like you should maybe consider a change if it's not. But on the other hand, for your career, like sometimes boredom, like you can do other things while being bored.
Yeah.
In your
it's
profession.
like,
yeah.
Is it endemic or is it just transitory?
Now we are on a truly deep conversation about boredom, which
deep thoughts with
PodRocket. Kate's in the background listening. It's like, what are you guys doing? I did a good job, outlining what this should be like, and you guys are talking about what it's like being bored. I hate you, Brian, which is fair. Okay, so but so you do have a video on like why engineering managers fail, right? So like, can we?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Can we talk about video? I mean, I think you did.
No. I've now done YouTube for over 3 years where I actually was preparing a video like 2 weeks ago. I was like, should you use TypeScript? And I was like, I did the outline, I was already to record it. Then I searched my past videos for TypeScript and I was like, oh, I made this video already. I was like, God damn it. That's pathetic.
Yeah. That happens a lot when you put in a lot of content. Fortunately, you're like, did we already do this? Well, I mean, so you at some point you made a decision to get into engineering management, right? I don't know how much you've talked about that. And then at some point you noticed that there was some kind of pattern, right, with like why engineering managers fail in the first place. Maybe you could talk about both of those things really. Like, how did you make the decision to go from individual contributor to management? And then how do you see why some succeed and others fail?
Sure. Yeah. Went into management because of boredom. It is a very simplistic way of taking it, but I got a little bit, I got bored of doing this. I found what I was doing as an IC too reductive for my taste, where it was like, here's a thing to code the thing. Okay, good. And like, that's horrifically reductive, but that's where I was at. And I was not really finding joy there anymore. And I've always been, on the UI side of things, I enjoy how things are made, but also like why things are made. Like saying to make a form is not enough for me. I need to know why and how it's being used. Even if it might not inform or change what I'm doing, it helps give me incentive and internal word to do that. So I've always enjoyed talking to product managers and design, understanding more how they think, and just having a more general overlay of how things are decided and put together. And then I also enjoy, I find myself to be a fairly personable person, able to, talk to other people and, potentially focus or rally them around some need or cause. And that's kind of, where I started looking into management and curious about what it was like. It was mostly just like, can I do it was the first question. Like, can I do management? Is it something that I'm capable of? And then I got the opportunity to try it first at a startup where I was leading a small team. And I think that my responsibilities, I always split things with technical and non-technical skills. And at that job, I think I was, 80% technical, 20% non-technical. And then I came to MongoDB from there, started as an IC, and then got promoted to be a manager again. And I slowly started to see those that ratio invert just due to needs of the team, but also just seeing my own stress level increasing. Like the higher the amount of code that I would do, the higher my stress would become, because then I still have all the non-technical work required of me that I didn't have time to do during the day because I was doing technical work. The weird thing about going into management is that all the skills that you've learned and gotten good at don't help you anymore. You might have learned how to swing a hammer and hit a nail on the head for the first time really well as an IC, and put a 4x4 together real fast. And as soon as you become a manager, you're the one now saying, here's the outline of where things should go, but I'm not swinging that hammer anymore. And like that impulse to want to swing that hammer is very strong because you can do it, but then you're not empowering the team. You're also not making sure that the bathroom's being installed correctly. All my metaphors about houses, because I listened to Brick House this morning, which is a lie, just a reference to make.
I did notice there were house metaphors, but again, it's not my place to judge.
At least they're not in the toilet. Or the last one was in the bathroom.
We're not there yet, but okay. Okay. So, there's, so that's true, right? Like I did the same thing, becoming, IC and then going into management. And one thing that I, would say a lot is like, I felt like I wasn't doing, and in some ways it's a very kind of, it's almost immature on my part. Like I was like, well, I feel like I'm not doing real work anymore. Like I feel like I'm not making stuff. Instead, I'm now I can understand intellectually, I am helping other people and develop their careers and doing stuff that they haven't had an opportunity to do, and all of those things. But there is something in me, and I suspect a lot of people, where it's like you do feel, I'm in meetings all day. I'm not the one that's responsible for making the thing that people enjoy directly, which again is super. It's so linear. Like what? Like if you just.
Well, it's also like if you got used to drinking Coca-Cola for many years and it was told it's not healthy, you switch to water. You're not going to enjoy water right away. Like switching into meetings all day, you're not going to enjoy that right away because you got used to doing the work for a while. So there's definitely this transition period where you have to kind of reacclimate. It's also all the metrics of your past success have gone away too. Like you're not being evaluated on how many articles you're writing, how many lines of code you're writing. You're being evaluated on these very abstract goals.
I'm trying to think if I agree. I mean, obviously there's a difference in marketing and engineering, but in marketing there are some very concrete goals. But like the goals are, did people come and read the thing? Like, you know what I mean? Like it's that. It's not, it good? Yeah.
It's rather than one thing, it's one campaign, right?
Exactly.
So like your purview becomes, and then you yourself it's impossible for you to, make every individual thing succeed. You just have to make the campaign itself succeed. And that's kind of true for engineering as well. Like you're not going to be coding every project, but you have to still make sure that every project succeeds. And that's a very different thing to accomplish.
Did you feel equipped to, like when you went into management, did you feel equipped to not just manage people, but like to coach them, to listen to their problems, to sort that out? Like, because I think a lot of times people are surprised at what you end up hearing in those one-on-one meetings, not just about you, just about everything.
So I got to cheat because I did therapy in my teens. So I got to just cheat and I was like, oh, I've done this. This isn't, because after a while, one-on-ones can turn into that. I think healthy one-on-ones can just don't look too dissimilar to therapy, except you're not really delving into issues when you were 8, just issues about like, the 8 things you're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
It was really, I think the biggest challenge was shedding my IC responsibilities and being okay with that. That was the hardest thing for me.
Yep. 100% agree. It was true for me too. Like it was very much like, because I felt really, no, I feel like I'm in therapy. I felt a lot of ownership over that, like this is my baby, Yep. So yeah, I think a lot of people feel similarly.
And there's also just, I mean, there there are new things for people management that you just don't get practice at if you've never done it before. And you hear about it and you understand it until you actually feel it. It's a whole different, process to go through. And then just fail doing that. That's a weird thing too. It's like you have to fail again to things that you've never done before, and being okay with that and learning how to, um, iterate on that in a very timely manner because it's people that you're iterating with.
Right.
And that's sensitive.
It is. There is a certain amount of emotional intelligence that's kind of critical. And
Yeah.
I'm sure you can get better at it. I know that there are, lots of formal classes out there, but whether or not they resonate with the individual is, depends on, because I've been to some formal management training, and to me, it's kind of, there's things that are like super obvious. Like this isn't, yes, you're right. I should tell my team what's going on. Like, you know what I mean?
So actually, for the longest time, I refused to read management books because I had hubris and was like, I know these things, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
So I'm finally reading I have a list now of books to read. Also, in large part, just so when I ask people for advice, they can no longer tell me to read these books. Like, I just need to cross it off my list of things that people can suggest to me so I can go beyond that. So I'm reading The Manager's Path right now by Camille Fournier. And it's good. Again, it's not things that are revolutionary to me, but what's actually really nice about it is that because it's a book and it's been iterated on, thoughts and ideas that I've had are very nicely put succinctly into the book. And you can kind of see ideas thrown at me that I'm like, oh, this is the thing, but put in words that I can actually then repeat outward again. And that's been actually very nice to read.
Okay, so when you were making the decision between, like, should I go from an IC to management, did you consider going into product at all? Because I feel like those technical PMs are, like they're very much in demand. Is that something that, and you had mentioned earlier that you liked talking to product folks. So I'm wondering, is it something you considered?
Yeah, heavily actually. That was a great question. Yeah, for a while I was like, I want to do product. I really want to do product. It sounds really interesting. It seems like they have a lot of fun. They kind of dream up what we're going to work on. They talk to people. Like it's all this cool stuff. And then I didn't, just because that path is a greater reset for my career than going into technical management. Like that's really a career pivot. Even though it's the same industry, it's still a whole different set of practices. But then as I've gotten older and as I've learned more about like the day-to-day going-ons of a product manager, the more grateful I am I never entertained that thought beyond just an idle curiosity, because I hear about, they have to talk to customers and then listen to customers. It's not just be like, hey, you like our stuff? You want more of it? It's like, no, what's your problems? Let me hear about it. Like that's therapy there for the company. And that's exhausting. That's not a thing that I find enjoyable, like talking to customers and listening to that feedback and then distilling it. And then the most unenjoyable part of that is then taking that feedback and applying it to the company roadmap, like that bridging of like from customer to like the roadmap. Like that is that is laborious. That is not something that I could do it, I think, but not something that I would really enjoy to do forever, because that's a long. Then I've now written more documents as an engineering manager, like design documents, which product managers do. So like I'm not as opposed to that, but there's this big, you dip more into sales territory, I think is what it is, which is not something that it's not sales in the sense of like selling a product, but in the sense of, selling a relationship. I'm like selling and like trying to improve that.
But there's a big, like I'm talking to more and more product folks this month, and, there's a big demand, or I don't know, demand. They're interested in acquiring more technical skills. And I don't think it's because they're interested necessarily in like actually, writing code. It's so that they can be more persuasive, either internally, and so if you came from engineering and you're a technical PM, like I would think that would be much easier for you to kind of talk to the engineering team and explain, this is why we're doing this feature. This is how we can do it in this time. And in a way, and basically speak the language. Like that to me makes sense. And whether or not you enjoy it is kind of up to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's also interesting because the role and scope of a product manager varies greatly with the size of the company.
Oh, for sure.
Like,
Yeah.
I hear about the product managers talking to other company, like enterprise companies like MongoDB, and I'm like terrified, frankly terrified of the people they're talking to. So I'm like, I feel way out of my league there.
Mm. Yeah. No, it's believe me, it's so different depending on the PM function is very different depending on kind of the vertical you're in, the size of your company, the stage of your company, like it's a wild
But
place.
but still, like, regardless of the size and the complexity, if you're a good product manager, you still have a lot of, relationships to build, a lot of documents to bridge, mental thoughts, and there's all that work of making sure that the business is growing, which again that's not where my joy rests. It's more like, how can we build the product? Like, what's a fun, exciting thing to do? That's what I enjoy. But the prerequisites to get there, which is like the meat and cheese of the the meat and cheese of the product manager. I'm just going to double down. Is not, it's like a stomach ache. It's not what I enjoy.
Today we found out that meat and cheese is not something that Harry enjoys. Yeah, I don't know what. Just lots of people don't. This has been one of my favorite episodes. I don't know that we have followed a single thread. If you're in your car or walking, or hopefully you've enjoyed the time with us. Is there anything that that you would like to promote, that you'd like to tell people to listen to, go find?
Well,
this is typically what I.
Yeah, I'd love to hear people's favorite metaphor, first of all, or weird reference. Would love to hear that.
Wicker Man is probably going to be a tops, yeah.
Yeah. And then also, I have a YouTube channel. Easiest way to find it is probably my Twitter account. So twitter.com/HSWolff. It's Harry, middle name Spencer. I mean, that's a secret. And Wolf with 2 Fs. The extra F for good luck, because we all need some good luck. Or just ancestors that had it spelled that way. And that's kind of it. MongoDB is hiring always, so you're always welcome to apply there. I feel like I'm obliged to mention that. I mentioned, that's enough.
Awesome. Thank you for coming on PodRocket. Good luck to you. Good luck to
the meat and cheese.
The meat and cheese and the audience for making it through this episode. We'll see you next time.